I took lizards from my cousin's house in this part of town, and I released them in another part of town, and they're all over the place now.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. This is your co-host, Billy Brown, and
Tony Crosdale.
And today we are going to be talking about wall lizards. But before we get to that, I want to do our standard reminders. If you do like this podcast, please go onto your iTunes.
Podcasting format of choice.
Your podcasting format. I was thinking, what the hell is that called that Apple does? iTunes. iTunes or Stitcher, or your podcasting app of choice. And please rate this highly. Leave some comments. And then tell all your friends about it. Tell them on Facebook. Tell them verbally when you see them in the flesh. Email them about it. Snap them at them. Or snap at them. Put it on Instagram. Any way you want to tell the people about how much you love this podcast, tell them, because it helps spread the word and so more people can listen to us. And be better connected with our urban wildlife.
And write us. Tweet us. Communicate with us. Any way you want. Smoke signals.
urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. Urbwildlifecast is our Twitter handle. You can find us on Facebook. It was funny. I was saying to Tony, I have Any Way You Want It in my head, and I was trying to combine that with how to get in touch with us. But maybe not tonight. We have more musical pleasure to bring to you pretty soon.
Yes, we do. We're finally bringing us to another song, so hopefully you enjoy it.
Yes. So today's topic is wall lizards. We've talked about them before a few episodes ago, and I'll post a link. We talked about wall lizards in their native Netherlands, where they're at the northern extent of their native range in Maastricht, and sort of the efforts of the conservationists there and scientists there to sort of conserve them, preserve their population. And what was funny about it, when you're thinking of something whose natural habitat is walls.
Natural habitat! One of my favorite things ever is in the Master of Puppets, when James Hetfield, he's like, was it worth all that? Natural habitat! And I have a few friends that know Metallica from playing together with them, touring with them, and my dream is someday they'll get James Hetfield to call me up and just say, natural habitat!
Right, wall lizards. Natural habitat is walls. Okay, so and that makes for some interesting ideas.
Is it walls?
It is, and
Are they
we're going to hear
synanthropic organisms.
We are going to hear Russ Burke talk about this. That in the wild in Europe, you'd see them in forests with sandy soil. They also probably live. We heard about this in the earlier episode about them in outcroppings and sort of cliff faces and that kind of thing. So that's probably like their very original natural habitat. But for several thousand years, certainly in southern Europe, people have been building houses out of stone. And so those are great habitat for them. So they're, it's one of these interesting questions of something like a house sparrow or something like that even in Europe, where they've probably evolved somewhat to live with people. I wonder the same thing about wall lizards, or maybe not quite so specialized. Who knows? But in the United States, we have populations of a couple species of wall lizards. I actually have my guidebook, my Bible, Conant, Reptiles and Amphibians of Eastern and Central North America, where, as we'll talk about in the Russ Burke interview, that there used to be a population of them, of the Italian wall lizard, in Philadelphia that seems to have gone extinct. I and many other people have looked for them, and they're not there anymore, apparently. But they have populations of the Italian wall lizard in Long Island, which is what we'll hear about a lot. Also in urban Topeka, Kansas. Who knew? And then the common wall lizard, a closely related species, same genus, is quite common around Cincinnati. And so first off, we're going to hear Russ Burke, who we heard last episode, talking about diamondback terrapins, or actually 2 episodes ago, because we're going to put in the Cat Wars one before this. But 2 episodes ago, we heard Russ Burke talking about diamondback terrapin that he researches and works on conservation advocacy for around Jamaica Bay and in Queens and New York City. He also and this is how I found him the very first time many years ago when I was looking into this question of the Philadelphia wall lizards, and he seemed to be like the expert about wall lizards in the east, the Northeast, and he is. And so he has researched extensively the ones that are in the New York area. So let's listen to Russ Burke talk about wall lizards.
My name is Russell Burke, and I'm a professor of biology at Hofstra University.
Could you describe to people what a wall lizard is?
Yeah, wall lizards, it's a common name, is applied to a couple different species of lizards from Europe, genus Podarcus. The two most common species that are referred to as wall lizards are Podarcus moralis and Podarcus siculus. These are sister species that live in Italy, and moralis also lives in other places in southern Europe, west of Spain. And they've both been introduced to a variety of places elsewhere in Europe and also in the United States. They're small, relatively small insectivorous lizards. They're fast. They're diurnal. They can occur in high densities in urban areas. I've seen them in Rome on old ruins. I saw them in the Colosseum, for example. They've been living in urban areas with humans for probably a couple thousand years.
Okay, and talk a little bit about how they got to the New York area.
Well, New York introduction, like the other introductions, like most of the other introductions, it's a little bit fuzzy exactly how they got here, and I say that not because we don't know a story, but because we know several stories. It's really probably we'll never know which one is true, if any of them are true. But the standard stories are something like that a shipment of pet trade animals somehow were released or got loose, either from an individual or from a pet shop in the town of Hempstead, which is just a couple miles west of where I am right now. And this is a suburban area and where they got loose. And so it's quite similar to the places they came from, very likely. And they survived and spread. So probably less than 20 animals to begin with, but now certainly in the many, many, many thousands.
What's their range around the New York area at this point?
Well, it's spotty because they're spread both by their own dispersal, them invading new areas on the border of current range, and also because people move them either accidentally or on purpose. But certainly we know they go all the way out the east end of Long Island to into the Hamptons, and they're also in Queens, so that's the full east-west length of Long Island. They're on the North Shore and on the South Shore, so that's if you connect up all the dots, they pretty much have all of Long Island, with some big gaps. I have no information suggesting that they're in the really rural areas, to the extent that Long Island has rural areas, but no information that they're in the more natural areas in eastern central Long Island, like the Pine Barrens. And then they're also found in New York City in a number of places. Almost certainly those are deliberate human introductions, but they are spreading west through the city and north through the city. So a number of places in Queens and they're on Staten Island. They're in Manhattan, and I've been getting reports of them in Westchester County, that is north of New York City.
How do people generally receive them? I mean, are people happy to see lizards? Are they weirded out?
A full range of responses, as you might expect. I get a lot of calls, especially in the fall, calls and emails from people who are totally freaked out because there are lizards coming into their house. And there's a very common fall phenomena where the lizards go into buildings because I assume they're looking for places to overwinter, and they're looking for safe places to overwinter. And so people freak out about that. Here in the building, the biology building where I work, We get 2 or 3 a week this time of year. People find them and in the hallways and come to me and say, there's your lizards, and we just try and let them loose. Other people I know have contacted me when they, and said, they've been living outside my house for years. I love them. I watch them all the time. I enjoy watching them behave. They're like watching birds at a bird feeder. You get to know individuals. You get to watch them interact with each other. It's just, they enjoy it.
So from your discussion and also what else I have learned about them, they seem to be confining themselves to developed areas.
Yeah.
Are they causing any harm?
Well, to address the first point, I've spent some time with them in Italy, and in Italy they certainly inhabit much more areas like we would call more like natural, in that not only do they live in urban areas, but they also live in heavily forested areas, especially with sandy soils, especially pine forests. And here we have not seen that yet. At least I haven't seen that yet. But here I have seen them living on the beach, and I've seen them eating copepods on the beach, the ocean beach. As the waves move in and out, chasing after the copepods that are hopping around on the beach sand. So that's a pretty natural environment, and so I don't think they're restricted to built up environments really at all. But they haven't exploited all the natural environments that they probably eventually will.
Okay.
So we do definitely, but they do occur in the highest densities that I've seen so far. They occur in the highest densities in urban areas.
Okay. So is it? So you mentioned people introducing them intentionally. I guess then, should we say that that's a bad thing to do, or sort of a neutral or a good thing to do?
That's right. I didn't address your other question about them being negative. As far as I can see, they're neutral, and
okay.
They may in some ways be beneficial. It's hard to say. There are certainly gardeners who like them because they think that the lizards might eat enough insects to make a difference in their gardens, and that may be true. I don't know. Certainly people get some enjoyment out of them. Some people do, and say, I would call that a positive. And as somebody who grew up in a part of the United States without lizards, and was introduced to lizards when I headed south, I could say that if I was a kid growing up in this area, I would certainly count having lizards around as a positive. It's something cool to see and collect, and kind of an introduction to the natural world. They don't seem to be harming any species that we really would be concerned about. Most of what they eat, or a lot of what they eat, are non-native invertebrates. So, one non-native eating another non-native, it's hard to see a downside there. They are preyed upon by kestrels, even kestrels that live in the city. A lot of people like kestrels. So, if lizards help keep those guys going in the city, that's kind of cool. And they're probably preyed on by other birds and probably also by cats. So there's some of that going on.
I don't want to get too far into the Philadelphia one, but I know that there had been a population. Well, it's hard to say conclusively that something is gone, but
right.
As far as anyone can tell, the Philadelphia population of wall lizards is not there anymore. I guess what I'm trying to let me formulate the question better. I guess that was a population that was sort of thought of as a population, then it was gone. When you're looking at populations of introduced animals, at what point do you, I know this is a discussion that's come up with in the birding community with ABA lists and what they count as legitimately on the list. Like, at what point do you count an introduced population as established versus possibly ephemeral?
Yeah, like you said, it's really a judgment call, and there's no hard and fast rules. And even if you made hard and fast rules, it'd be hard to collect the data to address them. I think when they reach the numbers that it seems very unlikely that they're going to disappear without an enormous effort on somebody's part, I would say that they're established. And when people call me to tell me that the lizards are in their house and what can they do, sometimes they want to kill them all. And sometimes people do make big efforts to eliminate all the wall lizards around their houses. But the next year they're all back. The area is repopulated. So I would say that they're long past any possibility of people eliminating them, and that's certainly established. The Philadelphia population seems to never have really spread very far, and maybe it never grew to very large numbers, and that made it vulnerable to being wiped out.
Exotic, invasive.
So I want to point out here also, I did a little pilgrimage once to Bronx Botanical Gardens, where there was an easy-to-spot population, to see the urban wall lizards myself, because I couldn't find any in Philadelphia because they're gone. And so I had a nice trip there, and maybe I'll post some pictures. I might not even have digital pictures from that because it's all film, but I'll try to find some pictures of that trip. And one of the things I thought was neat about this, and we'll hear it also in the Cincinnati one we're going to hear about in a minute, is how much they get transported by intentional release. That people see the lizards, like, damn, those are cool lizards. Like, they grab a few of them. It's probably like all like 10-year-old boys and girls, but like they grab a few of them, throw them in a box or in a bucket.
Name them Billy.
Name them Billy. Let them go in their own backyard, like 10 miles down the road, and then you got another little population growing out from there.
That's an interesting kind of like dispersal, like cool factor dispersal.
Well, it makes me think of birds that way, that people disperse, like as pet birds, like how animals in the pet trade get dispersed from a whole bunch of little discrete releases. Although birds, they can fly. Lizards, they can't really cross roads on their, well, they sometimes cross roads on their own. It's harder, and they can't cover the same kind of distances. It's also, I think this is a fun thing where if they're not getting, although Russell Burke said maybe they're on beaches, maybe he leaves open the possibility they could get out into the wilds, let's say, but that they seem to be doing really well now in cities, so they're very much a novel ecosystem kind of animal. Here's a researcher from Cincinnati talking about the Cincinnati population of wall lizards, which I recently rediscovered on one of my own herping trips to Cincinnati a couple years ago.
So just like that, I flipped under these limestone slabs on this hillside, a redback salamander, and weirdly, although not so weirdly given where I am, then I think about it, I think it's a little wall lizard. I gotta look up what kind, but this is a European species that I kind of knew thought was established in Cincinnati. You'd heard about it. Just, look at it like, what the hell is that? That's what it is. Alright, so I just saw a juvenile, whatever kind of lizard that was. Dark little guy without the blue spots. Keep my eyes open and see if I see any more scampering around. Right now I'm on a graveled old sort of overpass railroad bed kind of thing. Who knows? Maybe there'll be more. Looks like rocky habitat as opposed to anything else. All right, here's some more lizards. Can't find Kirtland snakes.
Sure. My name is Ken Petrin. I'm a biologist at the University of Cincinnati, professor of biology, and currently serving as dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. The species name is Podarcus muralis. It came to Cincinnati through a translocation event by someone named George Rau, R-A-U. He's part of the Lazarus family in Cincinnati. He was vacationing in Lago Garda area of Italy, put 10 lizards in a sock, brought them back and released them around his house right off of Terrence Court here in Cincinnati. So we know, and I'm in touch with George Rau, we know exactly where they came from, exactly where they were released, and exactly how many, and with an exact date, which is phenomenal for an introduced species. Yeah, these are the common European wall lizards, and this one is called the Italian wall lizard, and it's they're very common around areas, again, south-facing slopes with large stones or rocks or stone structures, very common around gardens. I was just in France last week, and I saw about 10 of them in a single crack in a wall that was probably just the perfect communal, a place where they use as a retreat in the winter. These guys are interesting in that they're pretty active all winter long. So on a warm day, you will see them poking their heads out to catch a little sun, which is very unusual for a lizard in, February. And it's the air temperature, we've seen them below freezing, the air temperature below freezing, but the rocks are catching the sun, so they're a little hotter. We've seen lizards out with snow on the ground, basking in the sun. So that's definitely something to look for. And that happens pretty commonly. And it raises a lot of questions about why. Why are they doing that? And they must be eating something. Maybe they're eating slugs or worms below ground. And we've seen them eat slugs and worms, but, it's still a little bit of an open question why they would be active in the winter. I had a student interested, and we know they've been spreading. There was a previous professor who was doing some reproductive biology and density studies on them. So we started to get interested in doing some genetic work, and this is what I do a lot of in my lab on invasive species and Darwin's finches and mostly lizards and birds. So we undertook a study, and we were interviewed by the local paper. And as part of the interview, I said, hey, you know what? Let's create a quick little website where people can go in and report sightings, and we will include that as part of the article. And they did. In the first day, we got 300 reports of sightings of lizards. And the thing is, in Cincinnati, you do not see many other lizards. There's an occasional skink you'll see, but skinks are hard to see. If common people are seeing a lizard, it's almost certainly this lizard. Yeah. And we got over 300 reports. Another article came out. We got another 300. And over time, we still get more and more reports. So we've had more than 1,000 reports that have completely changed our perception of where these lizards have spread. And they're basically all over the Cincinnati region, but in little pockets where one person, and not only that, but we have the anecdotes about how they got to certain areas. 15 people wrote in and said, I took lizards from my cousin's house in this part of town and I released them in another part of town, and they're all over the place now. So
why are people doing that? I mean, because I think of all the other animals people could see. I've never heard of anyone catching a bunch of redback salamanders and releasing them in their yard.
Do I really have to explain why to someone who's a herp nut? Why?
No, but I'm asking you to explain to people who have no idea what the heck we're talking about. I think they're cool. They're attractive, personable little animals, but.
And not everyone thinks of doing that and moving them, but we're talking that we got maybe 1,000 reports and maybe something like 20 anecdotes of movement. 20 out of 1,000. Maybe that's exactly the ratio of the population that is inclined. 20 out of 1,000 people are inclined to actually catch a lizard and move it somewhere.
I guess so.
I of course caught lizards as a kid, and I'm not sure if I moved them anywhere, but if I was visiting a cousin, clearly, enough have done that to have a real interesting impact on their spread.
Do you see them translocating or expanding by, more natural means?
We're sure they are on a kind of a house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood kind of level. I don't think they are getting places on their own. They are doing well in where there's south-facing slopes, along those slopes and down those slopes and up those slopes. They disperse pretty freely, or so it seems. It's hard to retrace everything, regarding their spread, but genetically, we're able to retrace a lot of their spread. We've surveyed 17 populations, and they show a very strong signature of sequential bottlenecks. So a lot of their spread is probably through one or a few individuals that are either carried or by luck make it to the next place where they can thrive. And then when they get to that place, if it's a good place, they occur at very high densities. But in between, there's a lot of, places where they don't do well. So we think that's part of it's natural, part of it's human facilitated movement.
How are they fitting into the local ecosystems?
I had students that were interested in looking at their interactions, perhaps with some of the native skinks. And we have seen them on occasion side by side. It's complicated because the skinks are naturally in decline, especially with urbanization. And the skinks occur or are holding out in pockets that are particularly good areas. But we haven't had enough of an idea. We haven't had enough cases surface where we can see them interacting in close proximity to really be able to study that. Other than the skinks, we know some of the birds eat them and some of the cats eat them. I'm pretty sure the garter snakes that are all over the place ignore them and they cohabitate with them. But some of the other snakes, it's a question of whether some of the more, higher predatory snakes are potentially tuning in on them or not. And again, that's a hard thing to study because those events are pretty rare.
No, you sort of have to have
it's an open question.
Throw up the lizards.
Yeah, that's right. And or you'd have to it'd take a lot of careful observation. But anecdotally, like in my yard this year, we had a ton of lizards, and somebody who helps us with lawn care noticed a lot of snakes, including what was probably a big, black rat snake or something. And then all of a sudden, all the lizards were gone. So I don't. There's an anecdote for you.
Well, I just have to ask.
Know, but it's
is that awfully coincidental that there are lizards in your backyard?
It is. They were there when we moved in. So.
Okay.
But it could have affected our housing choice. Which houses? Ours has a nice south-facing slope, so that could have affected our choice to buy that house. Definitely.
There you go. So how should I submit my observation of this?
Well, just go to our website, and you probably found it if you Google Cincinnati lizards. Let us know if you've seen them. I tell you, it's a great little citizen science experiment. We're writing this stuff up, and me being dean, it goes a little slower than I'd like, but we have found out about the spread of this lizard, and we could have never done it without the help of all the eyes of the public. And it's a great case study of how humans just making casual observations. We know that they're 95% correct because we've gone and visited hundreds of sites. 95% of the time we find the lizards there. So it's a great case story of citizen science.
Ow! Citizen science!
One of the things I thought was neat about this is, Russell had talked about how it's hard to know with a lot of introductions exactly how they got there. This is a fun case where they were able to interview the guy who brought them, and because he was a kid at the time, where they vacationed, when he released them, how many he released, where they released them. So it makes the genetic study, I guess, of this pretty interesting, and it sort of makes the history of it easier to document and to pin down, because you're not just guessing that maybe it fell off the back of a truck behind a pet store somewhere in Hempstead, New York. You're
really
saying
culturally insensitive that you are talking about Italian wall lizards, and then you have to say
fell off the back of a truck. I'm not saying that they were sold by anyone. I said that the box fell off the back of a truck and broke open, outran the wall lizards. Not that they were being hawked on a corner somewhere. But that the discrete introduction makes it interesting to study. And then when we talked about the guy who released in the beginning, he was part of a family that owned the Lazarus department stores, which if you're not from the Midwest, you don't care at all about this. But this was like the nice department store in Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up. And none other than Tony Crosdale was able to work that into the song that you're about to listen to.
And
tell us about the song, Tony.
Well, I just want, it speaks for itself, but I just want to give credit to Matt Halley as playing the keyboard. And I think we need to also give a writing credit to the Gallagher brothers for Or this, Noel Liam Gallagher. We have to give him.
I'm not much of an Oasis fan, so I rarely give them credit for anything. But for this, I will. Leonard Cohen for stylistic inspiration. You had said earlier, like when you were describing this, was Leonard Cohen meets Oasis.
That's the kind of thing we're going for.
All right.
Or they can decide for themselves.
Dig it.
And the stone walls you need, you are not finding. And your technicolor scales are blinding. There are many things that I would like to do for you, but I don't know how. You know, baby, Lazarus is now Macy's. And through it all, you're my Wonderwall lizard.
We'll wrap up now after this fun little wall lizard episode. Again, if you want to get in touch with us, urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at urbwildlifecast. Please go to your podcasting platform of choice and rate us highly. Tell your friends about it. And please keep an eye out because I think in a few more weeks we'll have another episode on the Urban Wildlife Podcast.
You know we will. Enjoy yourselves.
Right on. Real quick.
I was just going to talk about when I had a girlfriend who was from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And at one point, he ended up dying, but her dad was very sick. And we thought maybe there might be a scenario where we have to, like, relocate there and, like, take care of him for a while.
Yeah.
And if not, definitely. And I said my business plan was I was going to open a topless, like a strip club.
Yeah.
And named Cincinnati. And I was going to start a house band to play that club called Who Day and the Blowfish. And because, get it like...
That's a deep Cincinnati reference right there.
Yeah.
Because
Who they think going to beat them Bengals?
Is the rallying cry for the Cincinnati Bengals.